Sam and Sam Show on the Grueling Truth Sports Network. I'm one of your co-hosts for the Sam and Sam Show, Sam McGinnis. I'd like to welcome on my other co-host, Sam Teets, and it's been a while.
Yeah, it is. We had to skip a week there, but glad to be back calling you here. We got a lot of news to cover. We, of course, have to talk about the NHL trade deadline, which passed during our time off. But tonight, we're going to open with a sport I specialize in, basketball. We're talking some NBA news here, just to kick the show off with. Anthony Davis for the Los Angeles Lakers is finally cleared to practice. He will finally be coming back. And I remember when they were talking about they were going to evaluate him after 2 or 3 weeks, and that was a month and a half ago. So now we're at a point where, we might finally see Anthony Davis again, which is huge for the Lakers because obviously LeBron's not going to be coming back for a little while. They haven't even talked about his return yet. And based on, how serious those ankle sprains can be, we probably won't see him for a little bit. The Lakers have slipped to the 5th seed in the Western Conference right now, and they'll probably hold that. The Trailblazers are 3 or 4 games behind them, so I think Lakers will hold on to that 5th seed at least. But they need that reinforcement back. They need Anthony Davis coming back, and it's a big move that they'll have him finally back on the court alongside Andre Drummond and pretty much a bunch of guys they did not expect to have to carry the torch for this team in the back half of the year.
Yeah, absolutely. And like you said, Anthony Davis, they were falling down in the standings quite quickly, faster than I think I or you were anticipating there. So Anthony Davis is going to be a godsend for them coming in here late.
Yeah, some more big news. LaMarcus Aldridge has retired, and it came as a very significant surprise because I was just talking to some of my friends the day before the Nets had played the Philadelphia 76ers, and of course I had a bunch of Philly fans or Philly friends.
Yep.
And they were talking about how LaMarcus Aldridge wasn't playing. I don't think Blake Griffin played. Kevin Durant didn't play. So people were talking about James Harden didn't play. They were talking about the guys who had played. And then that same day, it comes out that LaMarcus Aldridge is a 7-time All-Star, 5-time All-NBA, or a guy who is, I think, 49 points away from reaching 20,000 career points, was suddenly retiring from basketball, which was a huge shock at the time because he had signed specifically with the Brooklyn Nets after a buyout to compete for a championship. Turns out he's having irregular heartbeats during that game or throughout the day, and he basically had to go to the hospital. And we've seen similar stuff like this with guys in the past. Chris Bosh from the Miami Heat famously had blood clots that forced him to retire. It's a similar thing with LaMarcus Aldridge. You just got to take care of your health there. And for big guys, these guys who are close to 7 feet tall, who weigh 250, 260 pounds, it's a huge deal. These health concerns are major, and sometimes you just have to be smart and walk away.
Yeah, and that actually reminded me on the similar note. I forgot to write this down, but Henrik Lundqvist is also not going to be returning due to continued heart issues. He had swelling in his heart after the surgery, so he won't be able to return either.
Like, basically retiring, or is he just not returning for the year?
He's not returning for the Capitals this year. I think he's trying to return next year, but like with complications from surgery, I wouldn't be surprised to see if that was it for Henrik Lundqvist.
Yeah, those kind of things you just don't want to mess around. So at some point, if you've made your money, you've made your fame, sometimes it's best to just walk away without risking your health. NBA players, there's also some rumors that players and also fans are upset over the compressed schedule this year, obviously because of COVID-19. There was a very short break for teams like the Los Angeles Lakers, Miami Heat, who were playing the finals at the start of the regular season. Now we've seen that kind of come back with stars like Anthony Davis is missing time. It's missed significant time. LeBron James, who was maybe the front runner for the MVP award at the time, I don't know if he really was, but he was up there.
He's not anymore.
He missed significant time. He missed significant time. Joel Embiid missed 25% of the season already with injuries. James Harden, Kevin Durant. I mean, the list goes on and on. All these star players have been hurt. So people are turning towards and looking at this compressed schedule that the NBA has put together and saying this is their fault for the increased number of injuries.
I don't really think you can say that a shortened season causes more injuries. That logic doesn't seem to follow very well.
No. The season's compressed. It's not the fact the shortened. First off, you had the short turnaround from last year to this year, which is the shortened off season, and then you have a lot of the games. They're playing the frequency of games is much higher actually because the schedule starts so much later. Even if you chopped off like 10-something games, it doesn't matter. It's still a very compressed schedule where you're playing more games in a shorter amount of time.
I understand what you're saying. I'm saying I've also heard it the other way where it's just a shortened one. And I don't understand where that logic comes from. The compressed thing I get, but the actual just shortened so they think players are playing harder and causing more injuries that way, which I've also heard for the NHL, it makes no sense.
No, I haven't heard that. It doesn't make any sense to me at all. There's no logic behind that. Whoever's saying that is just some Twitter hack on who just doesn't know anything about it. That doesn't make any sense.
I saw one thing on Twitter. I was just like, oh, I'm done. You're an idiot.
Yeah. There's some people who just don't know what they're talking about. But the MVP race in the NBA is heating up. It's coming down basically to Joel Embiid and Nikola Jokic. And, of course, it could change up a little bit here and there. We never know. Some guys could throw their names in the race late on or someone get hurt. My major concern here is that Joel Embiid, as I said, has already missed 25% of the season. And I know he's been dominant. He's probably been the most dominant player in the NBA this year. But Jokic has been more efficient. He's more of a floor raiser for his team. I understand that some teams are playing better. They have a better record. To me, the best player in the NBA has been Nikola Jokic, and he's been playing more consistently. I don't think he's missed a game so far this year. Versus as Embiid, I said, this was 25% of the season, and he's guaranteed to miss more games before the end of the year. So I think this is a really ridiculous MVP race because it sucks that all the leading candidates, guys like Harden and LeBron, and they got hurt. Kevin Durant, they got hurt. So now it's kind of been going to be Nikola Jokic by default, and he's still a very good player, but I just never like to see an MVP race come down to something like this.
Yeah, if we saw that in the NFL, people would flip out like nobody's tomorrow. We usually don't. I think over the last few years we've seen it pretty consistent. But yeah, if a whole bunch of quarterbacks got injured right around the time that you were getting closer to the MVP race, I mean, we did see that with Carson Wentz, but that was kind of an exception.
Yeah, it usually doesn't happen. Even when it does, there's always maybe 5 or 6 guys in that MVP race for the NFL. There's always people who are there who are qualified to win that.
There's really like 2 or 3, but usually
I don't know about that. You generally have a bunch of names that are in there. And like this past season, you could have given it to Aaron Rodgers won it, obviously, but Patrick Mahomes was there for a while. We had, Deshaun Watson, obviously, he's got all this off the field stuff this offseason, but Deshaun Watson was in there. Josh Allen, some people, Bills fans especially, were advocating for Josh Allen. So there were some guys up there. There were some guys who had a shot, maybe, but
it's weird to say the Bills are the best team in the AFC now. You know how wrong that is?
I'm going to hold off. I'm going to hold off on saying that until after the draft, so I get to hold off and say it as little as possible. I don't like the idea. But we're talking about the NFL, so let's transition to some NFL news here. You saw the story on Trevor Lawrence. Maybe you're more prepared to talk about it than I am.
Yeah, it's ludicrous. It's the dumbest.
He did an interview, Sports Illustrated, right?
Yeah, so basically, I'm going to give you the gist of what he said. I'm going to forget the rhetoric. He basically said he could live without football. If it was gone tomorrow, he'd be okay. And everybody's saying like, oh, he's got a motivation issue. Oh, he's going to have problems. It's actually more healthy that he's that way as a person. And generally, you want to be drafting more healthy people. You'll notice how they're generally more successful. Not to say some obsessive people can't be, because obviously you have Tom Brady and people like that. But it just shows he's a healthy person. I fail to see where the problem is here. And if you think he's going to have an issue, did you see what he did in college? Same thing then. If football ended, all this means is he's a more healthy person. People that are flipping out about this do not understand this.
Yeah, people who are freaking out about it are like, no, you have to be one-track mind. You have to have a chip on your shoulder. You have to have all this kind of stuff. And I'm like, look, Tom Brady had a natural chip on his shoulder. Tom Brady was drafted at almost a 200th pick in the draft. He had a natural chip put on his shoulder. Trevor Lawrence was good in college. He was better than Tom Brady was in college. He was probably better than Tom Brady was in his first couple seasons in the NFL. So, that's the issue. You don't have a chip on Trevor Lawrence's shoulder because he's going to be the first pick in the draft. You don't necessarily have to have a chip on your shoulder to be a great quarterback. And like you said, it's healthy to have a life outside football. People talk about Tom Brady being so one-track minded, so focused on the NFL. If that was true, he wouldn't have a family and kids.
Right.
So here's the thing. All that talk of Tom Brady being a one-track mind kind of guy, that's not true. If it was that way, he would have never left New England. He would have never gotten married. He would have never had kids. So all this kind of stuff is a little bit ridiculous here, where people are just taking it out of context. I know people are just looking for reasons to bash guys and create news at this point, but that's a non-story for me.
And I think this points to actually I think I actually like him more after that statement, because a lot of these people like Baker Mayfield that come in are very with the whole chip on their shoulder thing. I can understand in some situations where a chip could be like, I need to get over this hump, like this is a goal for me. But most of those athletes, or a lot of them, turn it into screw everybody else, which really isn't helpful for you or your team. And it really makes me like you less, because they end up being kind of jerks most of the time. So the fact that Trevor Lawrence is showing he's a human being on top of all of this is really nice.
Well, yeah, and Trevor's always been this way. Trevor's always been, put my family stuff kind of first. He's never been a
Should be that way, by the way.
Yeah. He's never been like, I'll throw my family under a bus so I can win a championship. He's never been anything like that.
Yeah,
So
Tuukka Rask. This is the same note. Tuukka Rask, last season when the Bruins went into the bubble, he actually went out because he had family stuff he needed to take care of, and all the Bruins fans were pissed at him. I'm like, again, healthy human being. You put family before your work. That's just period. Doesn't matter what you do.
Yeah, and of course fans get upset about it because they're fans. That it's what they care about the most. It's just they expect players to just be their entertainment and kind of live with that. They just expect them to live in that entertainment bubble and not be normal human beings.
So, people too.
Yeah, exactly. So I think that's a bit of a non-story there. But we also have news that Justin Fields is being linked increasingly more to the San Francisco 49ers. This is the news we expected 3 or 4 weeks ago when it was Mac Jones for the 49ers. This is all we were hearing, and now we're finally hearing.
It actually makes sense. The 49ers might do something that isn't stupid. Oh, yeah. Again, they overpaid a little bit to get the draft capital. But yeah, if they don't get Justin Fields at that pick, they will have made the wrong decision.
Yeah, I think that it has to be Justin Fields there. Yeah, they were obviously had a Slickman Pro Day, which the head coach attended. Kyle Shanahan was there. They were seen talking to each other, and the odds makers just watch the betting odds for Justin Fields going at third overall. The odds have gone from plus 500 to negative 100 or something like that. It's completely flipped around because everyone's betting at this point that Fields is going to go to the 49ers. So, Vegas has a way of finding out this information. They have a way of getting in and knowing this kind of stuff. And I feel that the ties there for Fields to the 49ers is getting stronger and stronger by the day.
Yeah, he's absolutely going there. It's going to be Trevor and then Fields at 3. And I forget whether we mentioned this last time, but Fields thinks he's like the greatest quarterback in the draft for some reason. That also goes back to a little bit of the Baker Mayfield thing we were talking about and kind of pissed me off.
Oh, well, that's not a bad thing to think that you're the best quarterback in the draft. I mean, it's not.
It's the way he said it was a bit arrogant. And I was just sitting back there like, first off, I think you're not. And if you don't, there's something wrong.
Well, no, I mean, he was in the national championship game this year, and Trevor Lawrence was not because he beat Trevor Lawrence in the game. And he also was in the Heisman voting. He was in the top 10 in the Heisman voting twice. In the 2 years he was a starter. So I don't think it's a stretch. And really, I kind of like it when guys say that they're the best in their class and it's not Tyler Jenkins. If it was a 6th-round quarterback coming out saying, I'm the best quarterback in this draft class, that would be something different. But when it's Justin Fields saying it, I'm totally okay with it because it's just how it is. And this guy has not been an issue in the locker room. He's been a leader. So it doesn't hit me as some kind of character flaw or anything like that.
I don't know. I think that it might be a bit of overconfidence, even if it's not like a character issue. I think that's a little overconfident of him.
Well, you know what happened though?
You talked about how he beat Trevor Lawrence. I never liked the analogy of one quarterback beating another because the defensive situations and the different things those two quarterbacks are seeing are never the same. If they were facing each other head to head, if one of them was on defense, but then you're not a quarterback anymore, right? So,
but if he went out and
in that sense,
if he went out and said that Trevor Lawrence is the best quarterback in this draft class, it's not me. You want to know what the headlines would be? He doesn't. Yeah. The headlines would be Justin Fields doesn't have that dog mentality. Justin Fields doesn't care about being the best quarterback in this draft.
We hear the same thing we're hearing about Trevor Lawrence right now.
Yeah, exactly. So it doesn't matter. There's no way he could have won that thing. He did the best he could have in that situation.
It's like, I don't know what to do with this question.
Poor reporters these kind of questions you just can't win.
See, reporters need to learn how to ask intelligent questions that aren't totally pieces of crap kind of questions. That's the problem.
Well, no, but it gets the quote, though. The reporter's job is to get the quote. That's the thing. It's to get the quote. It's not to get – it's like you have to ask good questions. And you can ask good questions, but if you ask 20 questions and one of those questions is like that, it's still a great interview, and you get that quote piece. And you know what happens? If some network takes it out of context and that's the one thing they pull from the entire interview, that's not your fault as a reporter. That's the network's fault for trying to jump ratings by taking that one quote out of an entire thing.
Absolutely, but actually, and this is going to sound insane, I actually do agree with John Tortorella on something of this note. I know, insane, since I literally do not like that guy at all. But he has bashed on reporters at times for pulling, because when they try and get stories, oftentimes they're bashing on people and players, which I think is the wrong mentality. You can still get a good story without being a jerk.
That's true. I can see what you're saying there. I can see what you're saying. It's a little bit of a...
I get where you're coming from, though.
Yeah.
I understand what you're saying.
It's a bit of a back and forth there. Speaking of a back and forth, there are a bunch of NFL teams, including the Pittsburgh Steelers, that have announced they will be skipping voluntary workouts. So essentially, they're saying none of us are showing up, and this is all in response to the fact that they had virtual off seasons last year, and they're citing things like reduced injury rates and stuff like that. Basically, saying that look, we know that as veterans, we don't want to code these off season workouts because one, we're banged up already. It's more wear and tear on our bodies and stuff like that. We'd like to have the off season off to rest and recover entirely physically. And probably also because, if you don't have an off-season workout, there's a lesser chance you're going to lose your job to some younger guy coming into the league and stuff like that. So there are some stuff to that where it's like part of this is probably like gamesmanship from the veteran kind of guys, but also just physically to keep track of your own health. And plus, you still have to deal with COVID. There's still COVID thing out there. Not everyone's been vaccinated. So it just makes it easier for some of these guys to not have to worry about that and exposing their families to that.
Yeah, and I'm going to say it might this could turn out to be a trend in the future even after COVID is done. Because you look
Absolutely.
at this, the injuries aren't worth it. It's not like the guys aren't working out. It's not like they're not going to be tuned up for when the season starts anyway. Like, you're just avoiding injuries by not showing up to some of those. Now, those are the voluntary ones. The necessary ones, okay, sure. But these voluntary ones where people and players we've seen in the past get injured, I'm not sure these are going to be a thing for much longer.
No, I agree with you because I could see this happening again. This is what I'm going to lead into it. I could see this happening next year too. So if it doesn't happen this year, there's no voluntary workouts, or at least not for most teams. And the injury rate next year is so much better, and there's not a lot of guys who are banged up. Guys going next year feeling nice. You start talking about again this time next year, like, hey, you know what? I kind of liked having my full off season off. I kind of liked going on vacation there and not having to go to the practice facility. So I think I could see that happening and turning into a trend here moving forward.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's going to be coming within the next season or two.
All right. NHL trade deadline and all the news from the NHL, McGinnis. Let's talk some hockey. What do you got for us?
Okay, this was interesting. This trade deadline, if you wanted to sum it up into one thing, was the most hilarious thing ever. Basically, all the major trades happened the week and day before the NHL trade deadline. Almost nothing happened of any significance the actual day of the trade deadline, which kind of pissed me off because I was on a 5.5-hour podcast covering all.
I saw. I clicked on that. And I was looking down at the timer, and the timer said something like 3 hours and 5 minutes. And I'm looking at myself. I'm thinking to myself, like, what is he doing? He's been alive this entire day. I hadn't seen many updates from the NHL that day too. I was like, he's been alive this entire day and nothing's been happening. This is fantastic.
It's unlike any year we've seen in the past, because past years, big moves happen on trade deadline day. That is what the NHL trade deadline is known for. This year, all those big trades happened the day before and the week before. So let's get right into it. Taylor Hall to the Bruins. I don't think anybody's learned from the fact that every team Taylor Hall has gone to has declined, and the Bruins are already on a decline of their own. I don't know why they thought this was a good idea. I understand Taylor Hall has some talent, but he's also really struggled this season, and they paid a second-round pick for him. I felt like a third round probably would have been fair.
Well, yeah, looking at the points plus minus or box plus minus for them, he's not looking so good. -19 for the year so far.
I'm not sure there's a Buffalo. Yeah, most of those Buffalo players are way below the mark for plus minus. So
yeah,
that's been Buffalo as a whole, not just Taylor Hall. Let me move on to the next one here. I don't know what order I have here. Oh yeah. So of the trade deadline actual day, this was probably the second biggest move. We have Sam Bennett to the Florida Panthers, and they gave up a second round pick, which was already a little generous for Sam Bennett. Okay forward, but he's depth, big guy. But then they also gave her a prospect that they had drafted in the second round last year. So they essentially gave them 2 second-round picks for Sam Bennett. And Florida was the team that got him, if I didn't mention it.
Yeah, so how does that – does that make them any better? You say it sounds like they're overpaid a little bit for Sam Bennett. So is this going to make them any better, or is this guy who's just going to be a little bit of a rotational player who's not going to see as much time as you would like for a guy who you basically trade, like you said, 2 second-round picks for?
He could be on the second or third line. He could be getting some playing time. He's an average NHL forward, which means he's depth, and that's what most NHL forwards are. It was a bit high overpay, especially if that prospect turns out to be something legitimate. They're going to be regretting that. But Sam Bennett helps them a little, but not a ton. It's that little extra push they're hoping to probably try and get them over the lightning hump.
Do you think that's going to happen? Is he going to be enough for that, or is that just going to be something they're going to look at and say it just wasn't good enough?
I'm saying this right now. I don't care who does it. Somebody beat the Lightning. I literally do not care who it is. The Panthers are actually a decent matchup for the Lightning, other than the fact that their goaltending is completely iffy along with their defense. Their forwards match them decently well. Though Kucherov might be back, so I would give the Lightning the edge there. But if there was anybody to at least match them from the forward position, yeah, I think Florida's got them there.
Yeah, and the Lightning are leading the Panthers currently by 1 win. Lightning are 29-12. Panthers are 27-12.
Yeah,
so 2 wins.
The way that division is likely to end up is the Lightning will end up probably taking that number 1 spot over the Hurricanes, and you'll likely see a Hurricanes-Panthers series, which will be really good. That's going to be a good series.
All right, who else got traded during the trade deadline?
Okay, so this one also pisses me off. I still am boggled by this completely, but David Savard to the Tampa Bay Lightning. So the Columbus Blue Jackets during this trade season decided to half blow it up and then stop before they completely shredded the team for whatever reason. They were like half decisive about it. But yeah, with zero cap space whatsoever, they take on David Savard. Now, I believe they only take on 25% of his contract because Detroit actually took on 25% for a 4th-round pick. And a first and a third, I believe, go to the Columbus Blue Jackets, and they retain 50% of it, I believe. So you're looking at the Lightning, who only have to retain 25%. But before the trade, mind you, you want to know how much in exact dollars they had in cap room?
How much? Zero.
Dead zero is 100% even. It wasn't even like cents or dollars because of the contract. It was perfectly zero with Kucherov out, mind you. So he's not even in the equation. How they're going to fix that? They're basically agreeing to total cap insanity next year.
Well,
which I guess if you get another cup is worth it, but
yeah,
man, how they're going to re-sign some of these guys, I have no idea.
You'll deal with it. If you win one more championship, you'll live with it. But if you end up coming up short, it's going to be the New Orleans Saints. It's going to be a New Orleans Saints situation where you go into the offseason, it's like, what are we going to do now?
Yeah, because you'll have to get rid of at least 1 or 2 players. Because, again, Kucherov's big contract isn't even in the equation, and they signed somebody on top of it. So, yeah.
All right, on to the next deal.
Nick Foligno and David Rittich both went to the Maple Leafs. I understand one of these moves and do not understand the other one. David Rittich makes sense. Frederik Andersen has been plagued with injuries this season. He's coming back, but it's nice to have that insurance goalie, and David Rittich is a good goalie. He's an average goaltender, like a good backup. Jack Campbell recently set the NHL record for most wins by a goalie to begin a season. He has had 11 straight. So your starter position, at least at the moment, is kind of set. Frederik Andersen might end up being the starter again. He's traditionally been that way. Jack Campbell is a very new commodity here. But yeah, David Rittich makes sense. Nick Foligno thing makes no sense to me whatsoever. Forwards was literally the last thing you needed. Defensive depth is exactly what this team did, and they got a little bit of it, but not enough. Honestly, Nick Foligno makes no sense to me whatsoever. You should have gone after more defensive depth. That's what's been lacking in years prior, that and goaltending consistency. So I just don't get this. You're one of the best forward teams in the entire NHL. Why would you add more to that when your weakness is glaring and obvious?
Well, and Foligno's a guy who's getting about 18 minutes per match. So, he's out there quite a bit on the ice. So you add him to a already strong rotation. What's that going to look like moving forward?
So he could be on the first or second line. He's a good leader. So here's the thing. Everybody that talks to you about Nick Foligno says he's like the nicest guy on the ice. Very much so, that Canadian mentality, even though I'm not sure he's actually Canadian. I think he's from the U.S. So despite the Canadian mentality, whatever. But yeah, he's so good leader, and you get that veteran presence, which makes sense. But again, this would make sense for a lot of teams, like maybe the Hurricanes, since they're lacking some forward depth, they could have. But I'm thinking probably what this decision came down to is all the defensive depth prices weren't things the Leafs were willing to pay for. But then they paid so much for Foligno. So then I was just like, if Foligno was worth that, were you not willing to go and get something like that for a depth forward or depth defenseman? I don't know. I just feel like it would have been far better for them to have gotten 2 depth defensemen instead of 1 depth defenseman and a forward. It really would have helped their weakness far more.
It's that nice guy attitude that put him over the top.
Yeah, now they're going to get Nick Foligno. I will say it's always nice to have veteran presidents and a good big body who's willing to play two ways, but man, you still need defensive depth right now.
We got one more news here, kind of bigger trade here. I'm looking at all the moves in this one. Why don't you explain this to me?
This is probably the worst trade I have ever personally seen go through in my entire life, and fortunately it favors me, so I get to talk about this one with all the pride and joy. So, the Capitals at the very last minute of the trade deadline were looking at Anthony Mantha, probably our best the Red Wings' best forward right now. Anthony Mantha, he's a good point scorer. He's getting the points consistently. So they're going to go out and get him. He's a big guy. He'll bring that physical presence. And somehow they thought he was worth Jacob Vrana, who's a good goal scorer, by the way. He had 2 back-to-back seasons, 25 and 24 goals. He's younger than Anthony Mantha also, by the way. So they paid Jacob Vrana, Richard Panik. Okay, depth forward, that means nothing. I mean, he scored 9 points this season or whatever. A first-round pick and a second-round pick. And there's no catch except the Capitals are absolutely screwed here. I don't understand it. Jacob Vrana was essentially Anthony Mantha except a different playing style. But then we also got the forward depth and 2 picks. I don't know. I don't even understand how they thought that was worth it in any way, shape, or form. But they just got fleeced hard.
So are they, for this season specifically, are they worse now or are they just about the same as they were before the trade?
I mean, they're the same for the actual team they have. I mean, I will say, I think Anthony Mantha is a better overall rounded player than Jake Vrana is. So they might be a tad better, but for what they gave up, I mean, would you give up a first-round pick, a second-round pick, and 2 players for one guy who's basically the equivalent of one of the guys you gave up? Makes no sense. Wouldn't. It's not worth it. They basically just burned their entire future to bits, is what they just did.
Well, yeah, and like I said, it helps your team out quite a bit here, setting you up a little bit.
Yeah, and man, yeah, that we were coming out of being the worst in the NHL, but this is really going to help boost us get a little bit further up there faster than we were going to. Steve Yzerman is really showing off how good he is as a GM and why the Lightning are what they are now.
Yeah, so your team gets jump-started here. And the Capitals maybe sinking their own ship here moving forward. But is that all we have to talk about for the NHL trade deadline?
Yeah, I think that's all we got. I think we went through it for the most part. There were a lot of other trades that happened, but they were really small ones that really didn't affect anything that much outside of the ones mentioned. And there's so many of them, it would take up the entire show. So there were a lot of tiny moves that really didn't mean much.
All right, which means you get to talk a little bit of baseball. Before you say anything, because I know you put down here you want to talk about the Reds, I'm going to say pause the season, stop the standings, stop everything. The Mets are atop the NHL East or the NL East right now at 5-3. Now, granted, they played fewer games than everyone else. I understand that, but it's by winning percentage in Major League Baseball. It's by winning percentage, and the Mets are number 1 right now, so I don't want to hear anything.
There's this thing I'm hearing in the distance. Is it somebody choking on their cake? Oh, yeah, it's the Mets every season. They do this every time. Why does this surprise you? You should have expected them early in the season to be on top of the division. I guarantee you in a month, they won't even be there. A month or 2. They're gone.
Listen. Let me have this, okay?
He's giving me the false hope. All the false hope.
It's all right. No, it's not false hope. It's okay. Once we reach the point where we're 3/4 of the way through the season, they've fallen back in the standings and they've won 10 games in a row, I'll give up hope at that point. Because we know after they win 10 games in a row, they're going to lose probably 5 of the next 7 and drop back into irrelevancy. I recognize that part of the season. But the hot start, being first right now in the NL East, I can live with that. I'm going to continue living with that until it's no longer the truth. So I'm going to stick with it. The Mets, they're looking kind of serious right now.
All right. Also, yeah, the Reds came out to an interesting start. They were leading their division for the early portion there, which was surprising since they were supposed to regress this season.
Yeah, they're now tied for the lead in the NL Central with the Brewers at 7-5. It doesn't look like there's a tiebreaker in there yet, so I think they're basically equal at this point. That could be a good division, although there's just a little up and down there. There's a lot of teams that I don't really know what to expect from. The Reds, obviously, one of them. Cardinals, the Pirates have not been great recently. The Cubs have not been great recently. So it's going to be a very interesting division there, but probably not the most interesting one in the National League, certainly.
Yeah, no. Honestly, the Cardinals should be a little bit better, but again, it's early in the season. 6-6, they'll come back. They'll come back.
Oh yeah, I mean baseball. How many games do they have in baseball every year, and especially like just in this season? They'll be fine. It doesn't matter. None of this matters.
6-6 means nothing.
Look, none of this matters except for the fact that the Mets are being in first place. That's the only part of all this that matters. That's the only key takeaway you should have tonight.
The key takeaway you should have is that, of course, they're going to drop back into the standings like they always do. But Sam Teets, he doesn't want to hear it. So we'll move on here to, let's see here. I think we have a new segment, Hot Seat, coming up.
Yeah, and you have brought this up, so I'll let you kind of explain to us and discuss exactly what we're talking about here.
It sounds exactly like what it is. From around the sports world, most people will try and take it from like one player or one NFL division or something, or one NFL coach. I like it, but I think the concept could be broadened a little bit to include just all sports, and we can just throw this down. So this is all sports hot seat. So we're going to be taking from each sport the current hot seat teams, players, coaches, etc. that are currently there. So we'll start here with Carson Wentz.
Yeah, and obviously Carson Wentz is coming off a season where he tied for the NFL lead in interceptions despite not playing the final last couple of games of the season.
He got benched
for Jalen Hurts. So
it's just, doesn't it?
Yeah, and this is what he didn't play a snap on the mega extension he signed with the Philadelphia Eagles. He got traded to the Indianapolis Colts in the offseason, where he's now being coached. The head coach is his former offensive coordinator, Frank Wright. I mean, if he doesn't do well, we just saw Phil Rivers at like 37 years old took this Colts team to the playoffs and almost beat the Buffalo Bills.
The Buffalo Bills, yeah.
So we're at a point now where if Carson Wentz doesn't at least make it to the playoffs, this is a colossal failure. And if he looks anything like he did with the Philadelphia Eagles last year, they're going to be talking about what the heck did we do in Indianapolis next year.
Well, what they're going to be saying, this is the bigger thing for Carson Wentz here. If he doesn't do well this season, he could very well be a backup for the rest of his life.
Yeah.
You're
not wrong.
This is do or die. And this is the team to do it with since he's got a good O-line now. Like, there are zero excuses for Carson Wentz this season.
Yeah, there really are. I mean, he's got to stay healthy, too. He's not as injury-prone as everyone says he is. He really only had like 2 major injury issues throughout his entire career.
It's not. You say that he got injured literally every single year he's been in the league. You realize that, right?
All right, let me pull it up now. Let me pull up the injury chart.
Every year -1, I think.
Minus his rookie season.
I don't know. I don't remember which one it was, but it should be at least -1.
Well, he has 2 full 16-game seasons. This 2017 season was the year that he played 13 games. That was the MVP caliber season when he obviously had the significant injury at the end of the year. Ended up missing everything. And Nick Foles comes in and leads them to the Super Bowl. Played 11 games in 2018. And then, so he's had 2 years. He's missed a total of 5, 6, 7. He's missed a total of 8 games in 5 years because of injuries.
Yeah, but it's not just the games he's missed because he's had injuries that he's just played through. That's a little different. If you get consistent injuries that you also play through, between the two, if it was one or the other, okay. But the fact that it's both throughout almost every year he's played to this point, that's injury prone in my opinion. I don't see how you can see it otherwise. Not because it's not an understanding, because it's only 8 games, but at the same time, he gets injured every year, and even if it's a minor one, that's got to be of some concern.
Yeah, but I mean, a lot of quarterbacks get banged up. I mean, Patrick Mahomes had the kneecap issue where the kneecap got dislocated. Was it 2 years ago now at this point? In 2019, I think was the kneecap dislocation. This past year, he had the turf toe at the end of the season, where you could see he was basically running around on his heels because he didn't want to step all the pressure down on his foot. So, I mean, these guys get banged up all the time. This is kind of a natural part of the game.
Sure, but when Carson Wentz gets injured, you notice. When Patrick Mahomes gets injured, he still makes it to the Super Bowl. So it's a little bit of a different equation.
I guess. But I view it as more as part of the full season and part of just playing a quarterback than anything else. But you have someone next up on the hot seat that you already mentioned this show. It's Taylor Hall, who I think is on his 4th team in the past 2 years.
Oh, Taylor Hall. So I remember going back to when he got traded to the Coyotes. He was this big trade acquisition because that was not that long ago from his big year MVP season in New Jersey. He has never been the same since that season. And teams have paid high prices expecting him to come back to that form, and he never has, and he's just been keep getting worse until we've seen an absolute atrocity on the ice this last season so far with the Sabres. It's been horrendous. I mean, the man scored 2 goals in like 30-plus games. It's ridiculous for a man that used to be the MVP. And his trade value is starting to go down. We saw that with the Bruins. First time he's been traded, I believe, for a second-round pick instead of a first. This is it. If he doesn't start performing, I mean, it's the Boston Bruins. This is one of the better teams in the NHL, traditionally talent-wise. If you're not succeeding now, you're never going to be seen the same.
Yeah, just to explain, he had 39 goals in that 2017 MVP caliber season. 39 goals, 54 assists, so a total of 93 points. This current season, 3 goals, 17 assists, 20 total points. Negative 19 the box plus minus. You talked about that. That's just part of him being on those bad teams at this point. But I mean, if he was that good, if he was playing like he was in 2017, he could at least alter that and dig into that a little bit. He has not been anywhere near close to that.
Yeah, you got to wonder where that season came from. I mean, he nearly single-handedly helped that team get to the playoffs. Of course, then they got obliterated by the Lightning in the first round. But yeah, it was a flash in the pan. I don't think Taylor Hall is that kind of – he reminds me like Carson Wentz. Carson Wentz, we saw a year. Carson Wentz is a high-talented player, sure, but I don't think he's ever going to be his MVP form again. I mean, do you?
No, I don't think it's going to be MVP form again.
He's very much so he's Carson Wentz without the injuries.
All right, McGinnis, and he's on pace. Hall is on pace for I think a total of roughly 40 points this year. So not even half of what he had in the MVP season. Maybe 6 total goals this year.
I mean,
compared to.
It's less about the points because the assist. He's fine on the assists because 40 points in 56 games. Yeah, that's pretty good. But what are you going to have? 6 goals in that time? Yeah, that's pretty bad. That needs some help.
Let's put it this way. I mean, he's played 39 games this year already. So he had 20 points in 39 games. In that MVP season, he played in 76 games, had 93 points. So if you just double his total so far this year, you'll come up to about roughly maybe I think 2 games over what he should have had if you equated the same number of games both those years. Yeah, he still would be 53 points short of where he was during the MVP year.
This is why he's on the hot seat. He needs to start showing that wasn't a one-year wonder thing. He's been headed downhill ever since that season. And I think part of the reason he chose the Bruins, because he had other options, but I think part of the reason he chose the Bruins because he got to choose. Don't let anyone fool you. They were talking about that. He got to choose. He wants to win, and I think he's starting to realize that after being on the Sabres, after being on the New Jersey Devils and the Coyotes, it's like, oh yeah, that thing I like to do. It's called winning. The game's a lot not as fun when you don't do that almost ever.
Yeah, so we'll see if he can turn on, but it certainly doesn't look like it's going to head in the right direction. Plan can change anything anytime soon. And you're bringing up the next one, the Washington Capitals. So another team you've talked about during the show. They're on the hot seat.
Yeah, this one might be more me than the rest of the world, but I feel like maybe they're coming back into it too. So the stigma, for those of you who don't know, for a long time was that the Washington Capitals could not make it past the second round. They consistently lost in the second round for a number of years, several times to the Pittsburgh Penguins, by the way, which I'm sure Teets is very happy about. But finally, one year, not only did they beat the Pittsburgh Penguins, but they made and won the Stanley Cup. They have won 0 playoff series since that time. They had 1 year, and they've lost in the first round 2 consecutive years since that. If we see them lose in the first round again, or see them not go deep or at least win a playoff series, there's going to be some concern that was just kind of a one-year wonder. It's the Capitals' turn to step it up, and I think that's part of the reason they got desperate for Mantha.
Yeah, I feel maybe that championship window is slipping away, which certainly, I mean, trading away your draft picks and trading away assets like that is certainly going to expedite your fall from grace.
Yeah.
It's not going to help you out long term. So it sounds like they're definitely in win now mode.
Oh, 100%. Alex Ovechkin has good years left in him, but eventually he's going to be gone. And the Capitals, funny enough, are going to be in cap destruction here pretty quick if they don't figure some things out. And that's why Braden Holtby had to go as well. So, yeah, it's they need to win now if they want to prove something.
And speaking of needing to win now, maybe not so much because they need to actually win a championship or have championship expectations, but they need to try to keep their jobs. We're talking about some NBA coaches here, Luke Walton and Dwayne Casey. And there have been a number of issues with Luke Walton over the years. I mean, he had, I think, some legal issues coming up when he first arrived as the head coach in Sacramento. But he was in LA for a little bit, was not very astounding there. And now the Sacramento Kings, he went in the first year, 31-41. Obviously did not make the playoffs. This year, 22-34. They have young pieces. They've had players get injured, like guys like Marvin Bagley just hasn't seemed to find his stride yet. He's been injured. He's a talented player, but I don't know why he's struggling so much. It's been very inconsistent.
I think it happens to some players occasionally. I think that's just a thing that should be expected unless it's a LeBron or something.
Well, yeah, but to the young guys, though, the young guys, you expect development to happen very quickly. You have some guys who are in their second and third seasons who are being talked about in MVP debates. So you expect that from guys that are taking in the lottery, especially guys that you know are good enough to perform at this level, like guys like Marvin Bagley. You have De'Aaron Fox. Yeah. You have De'Aaron Fox, the guy who's going to be an all-star, could potentially be an all-NBA caliber player in the future. Buddy Hield is one of the best three-point shooters in the league, usually. Other scorers like Harrison Barnes. So you have some pieces, not great pieces, but you have some pieces. It's just that the Kings, the fan base isn't really there. They don't have a lively fan base. They don't win a lot, and they keep doing the same thing over and over again. They have not been good since the early 2000s. And I'm at a point where I just can't see. I mean, De'Aaron Fox is a great player. He's one of my favorite players in the NBA. But I just cannot see a way that Luke Walton is going to turn this team around.
Nope. Yeah, sometimes it's just dead. It doesn't even matter what coach it is. You could have the greatest coach in the NBA at certain teams, and it just wouldn't work out. Heck, you could have Barry Trotz. Oh, at the Buffalo Sabres, they'd still suck.
Yeah, there's sometimes it just doesn't work. And our coach, it's really on the hot seat. Dwayne Casey, a guy people think probably should never have been fired from the Toronto Raptors to begin with, but it certainly worked out for Toronto. They fired him. They traded DeMar DeRozan. They get Nick Nurse as head coach. They bring in Kawhi Leonard. And they won a title. Now, they're certainly not that team anymore because Kawhi Leonard's gone, but it was worth it. You won the title. That's what you pay for. You'll deal with 10 years of misery. You'll deal with 5 years of misery if it means you can win a title. So I think that it was totally worth it. But Dwayne Casey fired for them after the 2017-18 season because they just could not get by LeBron. Ironically enough, he was the NBA Coach of the Year that season. They still fired him. So people were not very happy about that. But he called on Detroit quickly, signed with Detroit 2018. This is his third season with the team. They were 41-41 when he got there, his first year. 20-46 last year. They're 16-39 right now. They've traded away Blake Griffin, who was never able to stay healthy after one really good year.
I feel the shame. I feel the shame directed this way.
It's Detroit, man. It's the Pistons. They just are not a good team right now. And they traded away Derrick Rose, who was semi good for them. They traded away Andre Drummond, who was probably their best player of the past maybe however many years he's been there, honestly, at this point. So there's just no way. There's just no way. I mean, that's not that Dwayne Casey is a bad head coach, but you can't give him a team that's in total shambles like Detroit. Like, Detroit needs a full reset. If Detroit could take 2 seasons off just to accumulate draft picks, tank their way to the bottom, get all the top assets of the draft, and just draft a whole new team, that's basically what Detroit needs to do at this point.
Yeah, that's basically what all Detroit teams are doing right now. You think about the Lions are doing that. The Red Wings, holy crap, how many draft picks they have over the next couple of seasons is absurd. And then, yeah. Oh, poor us. That's how Detroit is sometimes, though. They have
Jeremy Grant, who's probably their best boy, I think by far their best player at this point, and he's having a very good year. But outside of him, there's no reason to watch Detroit Pistons games.
One player. It's literally one guy.
Yeah, there's no reason to watch Detroit Pistons games. There just isn't. I mean, the guys, at least the name brand guys on your team, Derrick Rose and Blake Griffin, you trade those two guys away. So
there was a clear message that they were giving up on the season. I mean, we were getting closer a couple of years ago to making the playoffs and all that, but yeah, their message has been sent. And I think this needs to go less on the coach at this point, because if you are trading those away, I think the understanding is you're tanking. And as the coach, you've got to know that, whether you're, like, you're trying to win, obviously, but you got to know what the organization is doing.
It's also a financial cap. It's like a cap reset because you're paying Blake Griffin a lot of money, so you need to get off that contract because he was not as good at this point in his career as what he was getting paid for. And it's just the point where you need to hit reset, get some of the older guys out, try to bring in some younger players, and just try to develop some guys. But realistically, I mean, there's no winning. And if you kept those guys, it wouldn't have mattered. You would still probably have the same record you have right now. So
I wouldn't go that far, but the record wouldn't be that different. It wouldn't be enough.
You might have 4 more wins. Derrick Rose could probably get you a couple of wins, but not much more.
Yeah, no. Yeah, the Detroit needed to reset. It's unfortunate, but I think the only team I have legitimate confidence in out of all of these Detroit teams of actually coming back and doing something is the Red Wings. Poor Detroit teams need to start watching hockey.
Yeah, keep waiting, McGinnis. Keep waiting for the tank to actually work out. But you
can't tell me that Steve Yzerman isn't doing a good job. Hello, the Mantha trade.
You still have to make the picks and get the players, McGinnis. You have to do that. Right?
This is true, but we got Jacob Vrana. He did that.
We'll see. But you have flex of the week for us.
Yeah, this goes. We literally just mentioned this, so I don't need to say it really go in detail again. But yeah, Steve Yzerman absolutely fleecing the Washington Capitals. They're screwed forever now because of that. Oh, I remember first seeing it, and I saw it on our group chat for one of the other networks I work for, and I only saw the first part. It was like, oh, Jacob Vrana, that makes sense. I start reading the rest of the text. I was like, this is a joke, right? Oh. So bad. I don't know who.
Hey, but I mean, I said it really helped you out, so I'm sure you love that.
Oh, yeah. I was like, holy crap. You want to talk about – we already had a lot of draft picks in this next draft. Granted, it's a low talent draft according to the people, but we all know you don't ever know what you're going to get with a draft, ever. So, yeah, we have a ridiculous number of picks now.
Yeah, that certainly helps you out quite a bit. Now we go on to, I think, our final segment of the show today. Thinking or dreaming. This is basically we're going to pose maybe 2 statements or 2 questions to each other. And we'll tell the other person if it's thinking, if this is a realistic statement, if it makes sense, or if it's dreaming, it's just utter lunacy, and it just doesn't make sense to us whatsoever. So we're going to see.
We've had a lot of chatter on the show.
Yeah. I think I started off first last time, so I'll let you go first today.
All right. I have to remember actually which one I had first here. Oh, yeah. The Browns are a contender if Mayfield has a career year.
This is thinking, because I think they're a contender if he doesn't have a career year. I mean,
I don't trust Baker Mayfield that much, but okay.
Well, if he does what he did last year, if he repeats everything they did last season, stat for stat, I still think they're probably going to get to the second round of the playoffs. I mean, they got to the second round of the playoffs this year with the way Baker Mayfield was now. And this coming season, they're going to get.
Play Pittsburgh, though. With Big Ben, who threw 4 picks.
What are you saying about Pittsburgh, McGinnis?
I don't know. It's just the fact that Big Ben's.
What are you saying about Pittsburgh, McGinnis?
I'm saying they suck. That's what I'm telling you.
I mean, that was a harsh game. In the first 5 minutes of that game, I always my hope in that game went up pretty quickly there. I hated watching the game. Probably the worst game I've watched the entire season. But the Browns, there's potential for them getting better this year.
Oh,
yeah. They get Odell Beckham Jr. back. I know they were actually better without him on the field last year, but we'll see if that changes or not. And even if it doesn't, they could probably trade him midseason and maybe get something back for him. They just cut Sheldon Richardson, which is very interesting. I don't know what they're going to do about that to replace him in the middle of their defense. But they signed Jadeveon Clowney. So now if he stays healthy, which, again, it's a big if. It's a very big if. But if he stays healthy, you have him alongside Myles Garrett. You're getting Grant Delpit, who you drafted last year. He's coming back. He missed most last year with the injury. You're getting Greedy Williams back. He missed most last year with the injury. You signed Troy Hill to be a slot corner. You signed John Johnson as one of the best safeties in the NFL in free agency. You've added a lot of talent to this team in the past couple of years. And this is probably one of the best rosters in the NFL right now. And it's only going to get better because you have the draft coming up here in 2 weeks. So I think this is definitely a contending level team on paper.
We are talking about the Browns, which is the funniest thing. But, yeah, and talk about turnaround time. But, yeah, for me, I just think Baker Mayfield isn't quite good enough if he played stat for stat what he was last year. But, yeah, I think what you have to realize is when they beat Pittsburgh, from that moment on, it was clear with all that went on with the Ravens as well, at that moment in time, they became the best team in the division, and they now are by far. It's not even close. They are probably one of the top 3 teams talent-wise in the entire AFC.
Yeah, talent-wise, I think you put them there. You have to put Kansas City there. You have to put Kansas City there just because it's Patrick Mahomes. You do have Tyreek Hill, Travis Kelce there too, Tyrann Mathieu. You have the
I think it's Buffalo, KC, and then the Browns probably.
Yeah, that's what I would say too. And I hate saying that Cleveland's the best team in the AFC North. I still think Baltimore might finish this coming season with a better record, might be a better team than Cleveland. But talent-wise, I think the Browns absolutely have more talent than the Baltimore Ravens at this point.
It's insane to think the Browns could actually win a freaking Super Bowl. I don't know what's wrong with the world, but it's hilarious.
You're laughing. I don't think it's funny at all, McGinnis. I don't like it one bit.
Well, that's because you're a Pittsburgh fan, and the realization is that your window just slammed shut in your face.
Listen, McGinnis, at least we had a window, okay? I know what a window feels like to look out. You've been staring at like this brick wall like in the inside of a prison for your entire life as a Detroit fan, so I don't want to hear anything about windows shutting.
Outside of the Red Wings, yeah, I think I got to give that one to you.
Yeah. All right, so I'll give you my first statement here. Players who miss significant time shouldn't be considered for MVP awards. And I'm talking about in sports in general.
This is dreaming. I'll tell you why. I've got a good reason. So
all right.
Let me ask you a question. Let's say player 1 gets injured halfway through the season. Player 2 was playing at about the same pace, and he continues to do that. Player A, the player who got injured, comes back with 25% of the season less, completely outperforms, and comes back on the prior player. You tell me which one deserves the MVP. You can still absolutely win an MVP award and miss even half the season. But if you're just that great, even regardless, and you pass everybody else, that should just tell you how insane you're playing. And if MVP truly means best player in the league, if you're better than everybody else, even having lost significant amount of time, yes, you should absolutely be winning an MVP award.
Well, is it the best player in the league, or is it the player that means most to their team? Because I've heard arguments for both. I think it's best player, but it's also I think it's best performance for the individual year. Because I think it's not. If it was best player in the NBA,
what it should be versus how it's applied are two completely different things.
Yeah,
what
that's fair.
Should be is most valuable player. If you actually hear that, most valuable player to your team, man, you could have some really odd people winning the award if they was actually handed out that way. What it means in leagues nowadays is best player. That's what it means. And if you're having a guy who misses time and still competes at the same level, or pardon me, gets the same kind of stats as people who didn't miss time, you tell me why he shouldn't earn it.
I don't think it means best player, though, necessarily, because if it did, LeBron James would have won more MVPs by now. Because he was better.
People skew it, though. We all know people get bought into the hype, and I think that's part of the reason LeBron didn't get as many.
Yeah, so let me put it this way. It's going to be the same way this year. It's going to be looking at the stats and the numbers. Like Russell Westbrook won his, and he averaged triple-double for the first time since Oscar Robertson, so it's great. I understand that. But you can't honestly tell me that Russell Westbrook at that time was a better player than LeBron James. So I mean, it's just that's how it is. I'm just being honest with you. If it's going to be, we're talking about MVPs, the only guys who would have won MVPs the past 10 years would have been LeBron, Kevin Durant, and Steph Curry. It just would have been those three alone. So looking at it now, like I think Joel Embiid is the most dominant player in the MVP race right now. But I look at the MVP and I say it is for the individual season, what you have done start to finish in the individual year. And if Nikola Jokic, who's had the numbers that say he's been the most efficient floor raiser, basically meaning he makes the teammates around him better. He makes everyone around him on the court better when he's there. The 76ers have been winning games when Joel Embiid has been hurt. They were still winning games. When Jokic goes to the bench, his team's negative. His team's losing whenever he goes on the bench. His team's bleeding points whenever he's sitting on the bench. When he comes back on, suddenly they're winning. I mean, it's like they're +8 when he's on the court, and they're like -1.5 when he's on the bench. So someone like that is like that to me. He is dominant in his own way, not physically dominant the way Joel Embiid is. He doesn't have that extreme athleticism, and he's not as good defensively. Don't get me wrong. I'm never going to say he's better defensively than Joel Embiid, but he's been better offensively contributing the way he is right now. He's been a better shooter, and he's just been making the team around him better than Joel Embiid has.
It could also be a situation in which he's carrying his team on his back a little bit.
Oh. I mean, the Nuggets have a good roster. It's going to be interesting now because Jamal Murray, who arguably was the second best player on the Nuggets, got hurt, and he's one of those guys who's going to be out for the rest of the year, I believe. So now we're going to see I mean, he's going to have to carry a lot more of the burden now. I don't think he was before because he had a good roster around him, but we're going to see now whether or not it's going to happen.
Yeah, interesting. I think we're kind of talking in terms of what it should be versus what it is a little bit.
Yeah, I guess we just kind of are.
But yeah, the MVP award is really, really interesting. I think, honestly, what they need to do is have the MVP award and then also just have a best player award. That should be a separate thing. Because if we had an actual MVP award, we would be handing it out to people like Andrew Luck. So it would be interesting to see players really get the credit where credit is due versus just the greatest flash in the pan for that year.
Yeah, it'll be very interesting. I don't know. I do like it kind of being a best player for the individual season. I do kind of enjoy that part of it because like I said, it changes up quite a bit. Because in a league like the NBA, where you only have 12 superstars per year, I mean, it's going to be
10 or 12.
It's going to be one of those guys every time.
Yeah, I'm just saying, like, they should have an MVP, like a true MVP, and then also a best players award.
Yeah, no, I think that would be. I'd be okay with that. I don't know how it would work in practice, but I would be all right with trying to implement something like that. But I believe you have another one for me. Let's hear it.
Absolutely. All right. Carson Wentz will have very similar production this season as Phillip Rivers. Pardon me, I'm getting my words mixed up.
I think this is thinking because Frank Wright to me is a very good offensive coordinator. I know he's the head coach now, but he kind of runs that. He still runs the offense. Let's put it that way.
Right.
So I think that yes, because he makes it very easy for quarterbacks to work in that system. And we have seen Carson Wentz had a year where he completed 69.6% of his passes. He's only thrown for over 4,000 yards once, though. And Phillip Rivers did it. I'm looking back, maybe 8 or 9 consecutive times to end his career.
7, 8, 9 times.
Yeah, at the very end of his career. Not even throughout the entirety of his career, just at the very end of it. So I think that similar numbers, I mean, I don't know. I think we could see touchdown-wise, Phillip Rivers for 24 touchdowns, 11 interceptions. I think you definitely see that from Carson Wentz because Carson Wentz had 3 consecutive years with 7 interceptions, and he threw for 27 touchdowns in 2019. So I think he could actually throw for more touchdowns this coming year.
He's got a better arm.
Absolutely. Because Phillip Rivers' arm was just shot from old age at that point in his career. Like I don't know if we will have the completion percentage Phillip Rivers had. Phillip Rivers completed 68%. Carson Wentz has done better than that in the past. I just don't know if he will do it again because that year where he had 69 completion percentage, he had very good tight ends, and that just helps you out quite a bit. And they don't have that in Indianapolis, so I think that he'll complete fewer passes, he'll throw for fewer yards, more touchdowns, and probably about even on the interception. So I think this is thinking. I mean, it's going to be right around that mark. He's not going to be much better than that. I think you could say he might have a better season. He might have a little bit worse season. He's going to be right around that mark, though, probably.
Yeah. This could also have comeback player of the year written on it as well, especially if they win a playoff game.
See, that's going to be controversial because there have been times like Phillip Rivers won comeback player of the year one year, just coming back from a crappy season. Like he came off of 2012 and just was not good and had a phenomenal 2013 campaign and won comeback player of the year. But there will be people who would debate, like, where are you coming back from just being bad? That you shouldn't win the comeback player of the year for that. So it'll be very interesting to see if he comes out and plays well, if he actually gets comeback player of the year votes or not.
Yeah. Again, what are these awards in practice versus what they should be are interesting equations.
Yeah, it's very interesting to look at that. But I will give you my second one now. Nothing we hear from now up until the NFL draft in 2 weeks is irrelevant. It's all a big smokescreen.
Hold up. You're saying basically all the noise we're hearing about the NFL draft is basically
after tonight, nothing matters. You can walk away from your computer after tonight, come back on the NFL draft, and nothing new would have come out that would have actually changed anything you know.
What do you know? This is thinking, folks. Fun fact. Wow, my voice just cracked. What do you know? But yeah, yeah. This is the thing. Most of the time, what you hear in sports, about 90% of it, most of the time is that way anyway, regardless of what time of the day it is. And the way it is teams have the interviews with the players, and they've been doing work and looking at them and looking at the pro days for a long time now. Like they've been making decisions on draft picks well ahead of the time. These decisions were probably already made last week. Like you could probably forget about it. These decisions were made probably last week. So, and a lot of these people might just be showing up to these pro days like just to make sure they've made the right choice. Like a lot of these people have made choices before they've done half of this stuff. So yeah, most of the noise you hear about, especially now coming in later, nobody's making a last second change. Like they've got a plan. These are professionals.
Yeah, you know, plans. They're going to be throwing out smoke screens though, where they're going to be telling you false information to just kind of throw you off a little bit. Keep their competitors guessing. Because here's the thing:
it's
the only time it gets really changed up is when a team trades up in the draft and throws the draft order.
That's the
and
only
takes your guy. You don't want people taking your guy. That's the issue.
Yeah, the only exception is when those draft trades are made during draft day. That is it.
Or the Las Vegas Raiders pick a guy who had like a third round grade, take them in the first round. But
we don't talk about that. Except I'm not a Raiders fan, so it doesn't matter to me.
It doesn't matter to you. The guys you take don't matter for 2 or 3 years until you can actually compete again.
No, the guys we take matter, except their entire careers are wasted until they retire or go to other teams.
I can't wait for you to draft an all-pro tackle and an all-pro wide receiver, a linebacker, only to have them be asked to get traded in 4 or 5 years.
See, if you're drafted to Detroit, I think you've got to know as a player, like, I need to get out of here as soon as humanly possible.
As soon as possible. Don't sign the contract extension. Don't sign the extension.
Forget it. Like, don't even. You're wasting your career. Poor Matthew Stafford. Imagine if he had been on a good team from the start, where he would be right now and what kind of a sense people would have around him versus what he's been.
No, Matt Stafford would have had a much better career. Had he gone to one of those franchises that just wins, had he been in, I don't know, Baltimore, San Francisco. I mean, he might have won a Super Bowl if he went to San Francisco, man. He might have won that game.
But upgrade from Jimmy Garoppolo, that would have been the difference between that Super Bowl. Overthrowing the one player, Matthew Stafford wouldn't have done that.
Yeah, Matthew Stafford would not have overthrown Emmanuel Sanders in that game. So you never know that kind of stuff. You never know.
Oh, yeah. Poor Matthew Stafford could have a Super Bowl ring.
Yep. But he's in Detroit, so we know that's not going to happen.
He's not in Detroit anymore. He's on the Rams, actually.
Oh, that's right. I forgot about that. You're right. You're right. He is. So there's a possibility, but it's the Rams, so it probably still won't happen. But
see, the Rams could make it to the NFC championship. The Rams,
they could. I agree with you. They could.
The Rams are the best matchup to beat the Bucs, but can they get to the Bucs first? Is my question.
Yeah, that'll be the issue. Can they make sure they beat the Packers or whoever else are going to be coming up there and potentially playing them in the playoffs?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's all we got, though.
Yeah, that's it for our show tonight. So thank you, everyone, for tuning in and listening to our show. This is the Sam and Sam Show, obviously, as the name says right below me, but we're on every Friday night at 9:30 to discuss the latest news basically across all sports at this point. MLB, the NHL,
NFL,
NBA mainly. But, we got all those sports that you need here. So like I said, live every week. So if you just mark it on your calendar here, make sure you can check us out. Live streaming Facebook. Basically, Facebook is where you get most of our traffic, I think, from the Grueling Truth Facebook page.
You can also, if you're one of those people that doesn't like staying up from 9:30 to 10:30 to watch a show, it's still on the Facebook page on Saturday. It's not going anywhere, so you can just look at it on Saturday.
And chances are things haven't changed too much in the 12 hours that we have been sleeping. So pretty much, I think you can go in and still watch the show and still get all the content you want. Also, make sure to check out thegruelingtruth.com. It's where some of McGinnis's articles are hosted. It's where all of my articles at this point are hosted, so you can check out our latest content. I've been writing 2 7-round mock drafts.
Writing machine. Sam Teets has been a writing machine about some of the different teams. If you want good updates, good analysis, you're going to this guy.
I've been trying to avoid looking at my computer screen the entire night because my eyes are so bugging out of my head from reading everything I've been writing today. So it's just but no, I've been writing quite a bit for the NFL draft. So I would really just appreciate if you stop by and maybe check out the articles. There's probably something you enjoy there. Try and trust me. There's plenty of content out there. So just give it a check. See what you can do. McGinnis, what's your Twitter handle?
All right, you can find me at SamuelMCG22. If you're an NHL person that is starved of NHL news because unfortunately you live in the United States, come to me, my good sir. I've got all your big NHL updates, news, articles, podcasts. I even work for another company that's only NHL. So I do all sports, but NHL is the major one. If you're looking for updates, come to me. Also, if you don't watch the NHL, Watch one game, you will never regret it, and you will thank me forever. So go do that.
All right, you can follow me at Sam_Teets33 on Twitter. Again, a lot of NFL draft content. Haven't been covering the NBA as much as I would like to. I'm going to try to get into that as the playoffs come around.
Much news on it, though.
No, it hasn't been that much, and honestly, just because the draft has been so loud, like the draft has kind of blocked everything else out, in my opinion, right now. But once we get through that, maybe I can start getting into the NBA a little bit more and finally start writing some more NBA articles, because I do really enjoy that. And basketball is probably my favorite sport to actually play and watch. So we'll get back into that. But for now, thank you for listening to Sam and Sam Show. We will see you all next Friday, 9:30 again,